stood at the front lines of law, leadership, and public service. Attorney Karen Jimeno, sharp, steady, a lawyer, an educator, turns complex issues into clear insight. Attorney Mike Toledo, seasoned, fearless, a strategist and communicator whose voice has shaped public understanding of law and governance. Together, they make the law accessible, connecting principles with real-life questions, confronting the issues that define our nation. This is Abogado.
Good evening. Welcome to Abogado, where legal questions meet clear and practical answers. I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno. Tonight, we tackle an issue that resurfaces whenever communities confront the force of nature and the cost of unprepared leadership. Let's take a closer look.
When disaster strikes, communities look to their leaders for safety, action, and foresight. Yet each year, lives are lost and homes destroyed in ways that could have been prevented. Where warnings ignored, where plans inadequate, and when leaders fail in moments that matter most, who answers for the cost? Some argue that stronger laws are needed to demand real accountability. Others warn that over-penalizing officials may hinder rapid response. This is a question of responsibility versus restraint. Tonight, we ask, should disaster governance laws be strengthened to hold local executives accountable for preventable deaths and damage?
Joining us tonight is a lawyer whose work sits at the intersection of law, governance, and public advocacy. Attorney Danielito DJ Jimenez is a trial lawyer and managing partner of the Jimenez Law Office, where he handles civil, criminal, labor, and corporate cases, including matters involving government accountability. He serves as a law professor at the University of Santo Tomas Faculty of Civil Law and has also worked in national security as a former consultant to the National Security Advisor. He is the creator of the Pinoy Street Lawyer, where he explains complex legal issues to the public, including those involving public officials and their duties. Attorney DJ Jimenez, welcome to Abogado.
Good evening, Karen. Thank you for having me again.
Okay, Attorney Jimenez and Attorney
DJ
Jimeno. Attorney DJ, let's start off. Before we talk about failures, can you first explain to us what are the legal duties, basic legal duties of a mayor or governor when a typhoon or calamity strikes?
Well, we have a general clause in the local government code where the mayors and chief executive officer is supposed to protect the general welfare, both of health and safety of all his constituents. And along this line, we also have a law, yung Philippine Risk Reduction Law, where local government units or chiefs of local government units are mandated to convene itong Risk Reduction Management Council on their level kasi they serve as the chairperson or the head of this Risk Reduction Management Councils. So that's their duty basically. They have to protect yung kanilang inhabitants. At lahat to, whether mayor, governor, even sa barangay, may kanya-kanya silang council under the law.
Okay, so nitong nakaraan po mga bagyo, may mga public officials po tayong nabatikos dahil umalis sila sa bansa during the time na nagkaroon ng typhoons. Ano pong masasabi nyo doon sa merong ba accountability sa ganong mga sitwasyon?
Well, without preempting the ongoing investigation kasi madaming factors that we have to consider in the interest of due process, no, and also in the interest of the public, no. Pero in general, I think this incident should serve as a guidance to probably implement a better regulation on this kasi Kung yung public official, matagal na siyang nag-request ng travel authority at nabigyan naman ito, kung hindi malinaw yung guidelines, no? Kung walang guidelines na if a few days before you leave, there is a potential typhoon that will struck your jurisdiction, you have to come back, pwede nilang sasabihin na hindi nila alam or andyan na, nakaalis na sila. So tingin ko, kailangan ng DILG should come up with stricter rules, no? And clearer rules, no? Kasi nga, yung isang nabasa ko, parang nakaalis na siya eh. So dapat may guidance, no? Kasi kung na-approve ka nga, pero very clear naman na may potential typhoon na padating, kung tutuusin, hindi mo kailangan ng wisdom or directive na huwag kang tumuloy, di ba? Dapat hindi ka sana tutuloy. Pero kung may gap sa rules, sasabihin nila, hindi namin alam. Tsaka siyempre, titignan mo rin kung ano ba yung travel na yon, ano ba yung purpose, o if it's a necessity or just, ordinary travel. So, madaming factors to consider, but I think it is time that, Philippines, being a typhoon-stricken island, dapat talaga yung mga ganyang bagay, stricto tayo. Nangyari na yung Ondoy, and some other calamities, and ngayon naman yung nangyari sa Cebu. Parang hindi na ata tayo natuto, di ba?
Meron po bang pagkakaiba dapat if you have a congressman that travels compared to a governor or a mayor? Can the congressman say that hindi naman legislation lang ako, so hindi importante yung presence ko sa aking district?
If we will base it dun sa risk reduction law, talagang yung LGU lang naman yung may responsibility. Kung lawmaker ka, yung general welfare clause to ensure the safety and health of your constituent, parang hindi naman siya strictly nag-a-apply sa mga members of Congress.
Many viewers hear terms like gross neglect, gross insubordination, at syempre abandonment pagka nga wala doon sa lugar nila or nag-abroad pa. Abandonment of duty, it's something that they also hear. Can you explain what this means in practical and non-technical terms?
Yung abandonment?
Or simulan po natin sa gross neglect.
Yung gross neglect, kung talagang napaka-careless mo siguro at wala kang pakialam, kahit alam mo na dapat nandun ka at hindi mo pa rin pinansin yung iyong duty, tingin ko yung gross neglect may apply. Although this would always depend on the circumstance of every case. Depende sa situation eh. Kasi kung nasa malayo ka naman lugar, wala ka ring magagawa. Hindi ka naman pwede i-compel na makabalik ka agad. Pero kung meron kang opportunity to exert corrective measures para yung iyong duty ma-meet mo tapos hindi binaliwala mo pa rin, tingin ko pwede yan. Masyadong malawak yung gross neglect.
Pagkabakulang po ng preposition or hindi nagkaroon ng preparation, hindi na-evacuate na maaga yung mga tao kaya merong namatay, would that be gross neglect?
Well, yes, because there are specific guidance in the law na dapat i-convene mo, dapat meron kang pre-evacuation. So, kasama yan. And babalik tayo dun sa, kung tutuusin, pag tinignan mo itong mga ganitong incidents, it would appear as if these are acts of God, no? Pero kung may mga ganyang negligence on the part of the public official, these are contentious issues na kahit sabi mong, bagyo yan, di ko namang kasalanan yan eh. Pero kung may clear neglect ka doon, there can be liabilities as well.
Well, ang relocation po, usually it's the LGU that has the duty to relocate yung mga nandun sa hazardous areas. And yung naging controversial din po yung statement ni Congressman Mark Cuangco nung sinabi niya na yung mga iba na nasalanta ay kasalanan nila because nandun sila naglocate sa mga areas na dangerous or highly prone to hazards. Pero kung wala naman silang matitirahan, yung mga informal settlers po, at hindi naman sila relocate ng LGU, can we also consider that as gross neglect?
It could be, to my mind, ano? Kasi siyempre hindi naman nila kasalanan, pero I think it is incumbent upon the local government unit na kung ina-advise naman sila na wag kayong pumunta dyan, I mean, these things eventually becomes a good defense. Parang ano rin din yan parang yung obligation sa school, di ba? Yung small guidance mo na wag yung gagawin to, wag kayo dyan. I mean, this becomes good defense later on. So, hindi naman pwedeng nakita mo sila bumaba doon, tatahimik ka na lang. So, dapat may mga pronouncements ka, meron kang ginagawa to ensure na na-inform sila. And then, kung sila pa rin yung matigas ang ulo, at least dapat yan dino-document. Siguro at best, no? Kailangan i-document.
Well, if an LGU keeps failing to update their hazard maps or disaster plans, does that already amount to administrative liability?
Yes, because remember, public office is a public trust and kasama yan. Kaya ka inelect dyan, duty mo yan. Kaya nga, it's very important for our local government units na pag-aralan yung batas on risk reduction management. Kasi obligasyon yan ng isang public official.
How much discretion do LGU officials have when it comes to disaster preparedness? Are they free to decide their own standards or are there minimum requirements? Kung ano yung what we can consider as prepared po?
Siyempre, may minimum requirements ka, may guidelines dun sa batas na dapat sundin. If despite meeting the standards, may mga uncontrollable events na nangyari, that would exculpate the public official, sa tingin ko. Kasi hindi naman sila insurer ng possible disaster na mangyayari sa constituents nila. So at best, yung minimum requirement, kailangan gawin nila.
Pero yung mga pag-maintain po ng drainage, yung mga dapat ginagawa rin ng local government and even yung mga regional offices ng national government, pag hindi nila nagagawa. So for example, yung lumalalang baha because nagbabara yung mga drainage systems, that may point to the LGUs not constantly cleaning out the trash or cleaning the drainage systems. Kung meron po bang mga nabaha na constituents, yung mga residents, can they theoretically under our law sue the local government for failing to maintain the public streets properly?
The civil code is clear, no? Sa mga defective roads, by analogy, kasama dyan yung nagkukos ng baha, it will depend on who supervises and control the roads. If it is the local government unit or it is the national government. So kung local government unit yan, the local government unit obviously is responsible for injuries and even damages that may occur on account of a defective road. Kasama na din dyan yung defective drainage. And if it is a national road naman, yung DPWH. And I think, Karen, siguro sa nangyayaring anomalies na lumalabas ngayon, nagkakaroon na rin ng purging, maybe it's high time na talagang dapat even disasters like this, merong managot para umayos yung ating gobyerno. Mawala ang korupsyon and yung mga ganitong bagay ma-address dahil nga hindi na bago Alam naman natin na palagi tayong binabaha Yet yung ibang public officials, basta naboto na, hindi nila ginagawa yung kanilang duties. At unfortunately, wala namang nagdidemanda. We had Ondoy, ako, to my mind, meron dapat sanang nanagot dun
Ano pong pwedeng i-file dapat nung Ondoy?
Well, generally, when we talk of mga typhoons, para tong force majeure na tinatawag, di ba? An act of God. And generally, if these events that may not be foreseen, or even if foreseen, would generally extinguish any liability. So, pwede nating i-argue na yung typhoon ng Ondoy, ano yan wala namang may naka-anticipate na ganyang kalaki yung mangyayaring baha or typhoon. But remember, one of the sources nung biglang pagbaha, yung nagbukas ng dam. Now, if there is showing na walang proper notices nung binuksan to, hindi gradual, biglaan. In other words, if the act of God is accompanied by human negligence, the act of God becomes an act of man. And if it's an act of man, obviously, there is liability.
Yung nangyari po recently sa Cebu, do you think merong mga potential liabilities there?
In theory, of course, we don't want to preempt the ongoing investigation. Pero kung lalabas, no, na even in securing the permits,
Ito po yung terraces na development.
nagkaroon ng corruption or what have you, na hindi naman pala dapat, meron at meron mananagot. Or even if, kasi normally sa isang development ng isang subdivision, nagsisecure muna yan ng development plan sa local government unit eh. And then pagka na-comply mo yung mga requirements, kuha ka ng mga DENR clearance, ganyan, then you can start the project. Now, you can always argue, may permit kami. But, you know, if for instance, may mga residente na nakapansin na, oh, sandali, nakakalbo na, o yung mga puno, ganito, you have to do something at in-inform yung local government at walang ginawa ang LGU. Kasi pwede nilang ipatigil eh, kahit na may permit.
Kahit may ECC?
Pwede
Kasi itong may environmental compliance certificate daw yung sa terrazas.
Yes,
in
because
Cebu.
remember, the role of the local government is to ensure the safety and health of the constituents. Kung sa tingin niya, kahit may permit, medyo disastrous, may mga ways to do it, no? Call the attention of DENR, hold on it, pa-imbestiga nila, dapat meron silang gagawin. Di ba? Pero kung parang, wala, may permit naman, medyo ano yun, depending on what will come out in the investigation. Pero medyo with your duty nga as an LGU, dapat gawin mo, hindi porke merong permit na, tuloy-tuloy ka pa rin. And we saw what happened.
The effects. But hindi ba defense dito yung presumption of regularity of duties, meaning the permits are on their face, proof that they can rely on the validity of the project or the regularity of the functions of the departments that issued the permits.
Yes, pero di ba meron tayong tinatawag na abatement of nuisance eh. Kahit sabi mong may permit ka, kung yung ginagawa sa tingin mo medyo parang dapat may gawin ka pa rin. Go to DENR eh, pa-explain mo, ito ba talaga ba itong safe? Di ba parang for the LGU, it has to do something else beyond relying on the permits. Alam naman natin sa Pilipinas, ang permit di ba? Kadalasan for some reasons nakukuha mo kahit na medyo may problema. So pwede naman nilang ipa-imbestiga. So again, depende yan sa circumstances, no? Pero sinasabi ko, warning sa mga LGU, pagka kinol lang attention yun ng inyong constituent, you have to do something. I'm not saying na aagrihan mo kaagad. Iba yung magpapaimbestiga ka naman. Pwede, hindi naman kailangan ipatigil mo outrightly kung may permit nga di ba? Pero meron kang pwedeng gawin.
And in the scheme of things, hindi ba mas mataas ang national government than local government units? So that pag meron ng mga permits from national government units, yung LGUs are powerless to question that.
No, but you know, the safety of the constituents is over and above. Sa tingin ko, that could still be challenged. May mga legal ways naman They can go to DENR, sandali. Huwag niyong ituloy yan kasi masama yan sa amin. Ito, meron kaming findings. So, the LGU can come up with a committee, with a further investigation. Kumbaga, meron kang mandate, no, na protektahan mo ang welfare ng iyong constituents.
Mabalik po tayo dun sa mga umalis and let's say they, as a defense, raised that, well, I have a travel authority and matagal ng plano to, so natuloy sila. But if the mayor or governor is physically absent, tapos unreachable pa during a calamity, can that be considered as abandonment of duty? Or is it an excuse na, wala ako sa bansa
Well, strictly speaking, when we talk of abandonment in legal context, there is an intention not to return. So if you merely travel, theoretically, that is not outrightly abandonment. But to a certain extent, if you fail to provide the ways and means to at least make sure that they can communicate to you, medyo, I think may, may negligence pa rin. Dahil nga, public office is a public trust. Hindi naman kasalanan ng taong bayan na magde-demand sila ng accountability dahil pinili mo yan, nagpaboto ka. So dapat, at the very least, kung aalis ka man, make sure na proper coordination is made. Meron namang Facebook, may Messenger, may WhatsApp, may Viber. Dapat nandun ka, hindi yung asa na si Mayor o asa na si wala, hindi humakita di ba? So kailangan, I think at the end of the day for the LGUs, napaka-importante po ng foresight at saka prudence.
May mga typhoons na po tayong dumaan, including yung mga recently that tumama rin sa Cebu that caused casualties. Can LGUs be held accountable for deaths of people?
Well, in theory, I think yes, no? No less than our civil code acknowledges that. But case-by-case basis, no? Kailangan mapakita mo na there was negligence that rendered or that made the act of man humanized. Na dahil sa negligence mo, na-humanize yung act of God. So, act of man na siya. Being an act of man, dapat managot ka.
And if it's negligence, it would be a civil case.
Yes, of course.
At what point pwedeng maging criminally liable,
Criminal?
if any?
Well, I think, kung may issue on corruption, or reckless imprudence
resulting in homicide.
In homicide, so yung mga ganong cases. But pag criminal case kasi, the quantum of evidence is higher.
Proof beyond reasonable doubt. And then pag homicide, siguro yung intent to kill is something that you have to establish.
I don't think that would, wala namang may gustong mamatay, di ba? So doon ka lang sa reckless offense na napakahirap din i-prove. Kasi lalo na kung binabahayan, merong mga ibang local governments na syempre yung sarili din nila, kailangan nilang tulungan. Kung busy sila na nag-a-attend sa pag-relocate ng ibang constituents nila, hindi naman pwede na porke ikaw nandito ka, oy, tulungan mo muna ako. It's very complex. Case-by-case basis yan. Now, it's very important for the LGUs to make sure that everything is documented. So, during calamities, kung meron kayong normally, meron mga group chat yan, monitoring na ginagawa nyo, nagko-coordinate kayo sa Meralco na, tanggalin nyo na yung babaha na rito para walang makukuryente. Those things would negate any amount of negligence, even simple negligence. So, very important that you document it at saka aware ka sa nangyayari.
Well, when there is poor coordination between an LGU and the national government, that resulted in a disaster. Kasi yung hazard nandyan na yan pero a disaster only happens pagka meron kang vulnerability like people exposed to the disaster because they're not evacuated or properties damaged because poorly maintained yung city or yung buong probinsya. Usually nagpapasahan ng blame yan, pero ultimately, where does the liability fall? Or how do you determine liability?
Again, case-by-case basis, but bottom line is if there is negligence, definitely then the negligence would contribute to the liability. So doon pa rin yan sa kung medyo sumablay ka, pumalpak ka, there is still a certain degree of liability which could either be administrative and in some cases even civil.
May mga nagsususpect din ng mga tao na yung mga disaster funds na de-deplete bago pa magkaroon ng disasters or minsan they become misused. How does the law deal with unaudited or yung mga misused funds that are meant for disaster sa local level?
Well, regardless whether it's for disaster, for any governmental purpose, if you squander government funds, that's malversation. So that's criminal, no? And no amount of excuse could escape any liability. In fact, you can even be held liable for technical malversation kung inalat mo for a different purpose. Kahit sabihin mong personally, you did not benefit from it. So, again, public office is a public trust. Yeah, nagdesisyon kayong pumasok dyan, then might as well abide by the law.
Eh yung time po ng Yolanda rehabilitation, but I noticed it's not just in the worst rehabilitation we had to face nung Yolanda rehab. Kasi ang criticism that time was napakabagal daw ng rehabilitation. But over the years, tuwing meron pong nagiging disaster, mabagal minsan yung pag-release ng tinatawag na quick response funds. Kaya ang nagiging criticism nga nila, hindi daw quick response yung funds. Yung pagka mabagal po ba, can you claim negligence on the part of DBM or any of the agencies that are involved in the approval process?
Well, other than general assertions, it's really hard to establish that because we have to follow COA guidelines. Napakadaming reasons din if there is a delay. So mahirap mo i-compartmentalize na there was a delay, so dapat liable ka. So medyo mahirap yan. That's part of service din naman and people need to be patient as well.
Pagka meron pong mga evacuation na nagaganap, yung pre-evacuation, at ayaw sumunod ng mga residents, how do you determine yung to what extent liable or accountable yung LGU for those people who refuse to evacuate?
Well, I think as long as it's all documented, and still they refuse. Technically, pwede mo pang i-force sila for their own safety. Patawag ka ng police. Tingin ko ano naman yan. As long as you document it, wala ka ng liability dun. Kung gusto nila magpakamatay at magpakalunod dun sa nasa sa kanila na yun. But you know, at least the local government unit must at least exert reasonable effort to explain to their constituents na kailangan po ito. And if need be, talagang physically tanggalin nila.
To what extent can you use force, physical force, para ilipat sila sa safety?
It's a case-by-case basis. But I think you are excused naman to exercise reasonable force as long as hindi mo naman sinasakal or what, no? Talagang dalhin mo talaga for their own safety yun Kasi baka malay mo, baka may mental issue na yun kaya ayaw niya. So, patawag ka ng ambulansya.
Attorney DJ, yung nagkaroon naman ng earthquake sa Cebu, maraming aftershocks na tumagal. So, meron din mga na-evacuate sa 10 cities na matagal din silang nanatili sa 10 cities. May mga napanood po ko na nagrereklamo kasi nagkasakit na sila doon. I think the conditions were also not ideal, yung hygiene, sanitation. Pag ganun po ba, may liability rin yung either local government or national government for the conditions of the temporary shelters?
I think if there is clear negligence or disregard ng mga basic needs nila, possibly, but mahirap mo kasing yan, lalo na if you're in a calamity.
Oo, pa nagka-breakout ng sakit, gano'n, hindi ba pwedeng sisihin yung nagme-maintain ng temporary shelters, which can be the LGU or DSWD?
Again, case-by-case basis. If there is basis to establish na nagkaroon ng recklessness or negligence in handling it, kasi pwede naman kahit na basta malinis I think yung cleanliness, di mo naman kailangan ng pera doon. Masyado, kahit wala masyadong fund, pero make sure na yung system ng disposal ng garbage maayos, hindi mo magkakasakit. So, kung malinaw na meron kang recklessness doon or you did not provide the proper way in accordance with the rules, baka pwede. So case by case basis pa rin yan.
Sino po ba ang nagko-conduct ng investigation and then later prosecution for these types of cases? So let's say yung isa yung potentially pag rineklamo ka ng mga constituents mo for being abroad during a calamity, or yung pagka merong allegations of negligence that leads to loss of property and loss of life?
Well, under our Constitution, the President, the Office of the President, exercises general supervision in our local government units. And with this supervision, pwedeng magpaimbestiga ang Office of the President through the DILG for any malfeasance or misfeasance or any negligence on the part of a public official. And if it's a highly urbanized city, pwedeng diretso ang Office of the President upon investigation and recommendation by the DILG, order the preventive suspension of this erring local government officials if there's a showing na itatamper nila yung evidence that would establish yung negligence nila. So, pwede silang i-preventive suspension. Pero yung as a penalty, removal, and all, ombudsman yan. So, mag-iimbestiga lang ang DILG, and then upon recommendation, pwedeng i-preventive suspension, and then kung may kaso, isasampas sa ombudsman. And then ombudsman yung decide kung merong administrative liability or dapat filean ng criminal case.
Kung sino mang public official. But if you're an ordinary citizen, how do you implement that or execute yung pag-file pa lang ng complaint? Saan ka dudulog?
Well, depende yan nga. No? So kung halimbawa, ordinary city ka, so pwede dun sa provincial, magreklamo ka, ireklamo mo yung nasa baba. Kung barangay naman yan, yung mayor, pwede ka dun magreklamo.
So someone higher?
Someone higher. So ang Office of the President, doon lang sa highly urbanized na pwedeng diretso. But generally, we follow the hierarchy.
Okay. If you're not highly urbanized like a municipality, pero ang gusto mo i-complain ay saan ka pupunta sa
yung next,
governor?
Next na mas mataas. So kung mayor, yung governor, pwede kang ganon.
And if yung governor na yung gusto mo i-complain, Office of the President.
Yes. And in some cases, pwede diretso, I think, sa ombudsman. Merong mga offices or regional offices yung ombudsman na kung clearly may violate, kahit barangay captain ka pa, pwede kang idiretso sa ombudsman. At yung ombudsman, pwedeng mag-preventive suspension din.
How do we prevent disaster investigations from becoming political weapons used against opponents?
That is a political question. Maybe siguro pagka ang ating bansa talagang hindi na naging highly politicized, na institutionalized yung funding, we would have good law, siguro maiwasan to. Otherwise, it's part of the system.
Naalala ko lang kasi kanina sa threads, parang may nakita kong post ni Governor Pambari 4 na ito na sinisimulan na rin yung demolition job against her. But I'm not sure. She didn't specify what it was about. But the only thing I can see from as a third-party observer is yung sunod-sunod na sakuna na umaabot sa Cebu. No? Yung earthquakes and then sunod-sunod na typhoons. Well, for now, we'll have to take a short break. But when we return, we ask if preventable deaths should carry heavier penalties for public officials and what reforms can build real culture of accountability. This is Abogado. Welcome back to Abogado. And still with us is Attorney DJ Jimenez as we continue our discussion on accountability in disaster governance and the role of local executives. Attorney DJ, before we close, two final reflections. Should preventable deaths carry heavier penalties for public officials?
I think so. Kasi hindi na bago na Philippines is prone to typhoons and many disasters. So I think there should be a higher degree of prudence. So by imposing stiffer and heavier towards public officials who would neglect in their duty to ensure the welfare of their constituents, that might prevent. No? And aside from that, even the DILG should probably come up with stricter rules, no, in matter of travels. No? And what I said earlier, if in a few days there is an anticipated typhoon, as a matter of course, there should be a clear regulation where the public officials should be directed to cancel any flight.
So in your opinion, yung mga ganyang bagay, yung pag-penalize, pagpapalaki ng penalties when you have public officials that because of their reckless imprudence or negligence causes the death of other people, or yung mga nawawala kasi inuuna pa nila yung personal travels nila, ito yung dapat i-spell out pa. Hindi ba pwedeng mag-rely tayo sa one, delikadesa, and second, yung fundamental principle sa ating code of governance na parang public service is a public trust?
Ang tagal na kasi nung code eh. And it seems na hindi nakakarating yung message sa ibang public officials. But of course, aside from that, dapat yung community din as a whole should also be educated. Na in times like this, you don't just rely on the public officials. No? You also have to do your duty as a responsible citizen na wag ka namang pasaway.
Kapag pinapa-evacuate, sumunod,
yes,
gano'n.
Of course. So kailangan pa rin yung education.
Yeah.
So aside from stiffer laws.
Oo. And siguro yung culture din ng mga Pilipino na they should demand yung accountability.
Yes.
Oo,
and it's happening now.
Mawala impunity, no?
Yes, and it's happening. If there's one thing that is good with what is happening around, at least yung accountability, sumisigaw na yung taong bayan in all levels.
And finally, dati po may na-file na bills both in Congress and Senate that seeks to create a Department of Disaster Resilience. Palagay niyo po ba kailangan pa tong department na to? Or sapat na ba yung mga batas natin, including the Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act, yung RA 10121?
Tingin ko kung tutuusin na sapat na pero it's just a matter of making sure na there is proper coordination. Andyan ng DSWD. So, talagang siguro dapat ayusin lang. Now, if they want to change it into some other names, basta yung coordination is addressed in whatever way, I think that's the solution. Hindi naman necessary na magkaroon ka ng bagong batas. Pwedeng ayusin mo na lang what we now have to ensure that what has been happening or has happened will no longer happen, or at least ma-prevent yung casualty.
Okay, and finally, since what we've seen so far with flood control projects ay mukhang nabulsa lang yung karamihan ng pera, palagay mo ba dapat ilipat to sa ibang department yung mandate of designing and implementing flood control projects?
First and foremost, I think kailangan tayong as a people, we have to really reflect, ano? Alam mo, yung dishonesty, parang it became more of a general rule than the exception eh. So tingin ko, balik tayo sa basic. Kasi kung andyan yung core values mo, kung tutuusin, hindi mo naman kailangan mag-come up ng iba-ibang departments eh. So we really have to reflect, no, yung ating values as a people. And from there, sana mabago na kung ano man yung kailangan baguhin.
At marami yun. Maraming kailangan baguhin. Thank you again for joining us today, Attorney DJ Jimenez. As the climate grows harsher, our duty to strengthen governance grows clearer. Local leaders carry the responsibility to prepare, respond, and protect. And when lives are lost needlessly, the law must speak. This is Abogado. Good night.